Well, good morning, Kathy. It's so nice to be here with you.
And good morning to you. It's so lovely to be here with you as well.
Yeah, I'm usually the co-host of the Untitled Theme Entertainment Design Show, and I'm happy to be here co-hosting with for another show for the first time with you.
Very exciting. Would you like to kick it off for today since you're
Sure.
our co-host? Our
Well,
guest
welcome.
co-host.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll do the honors. Welcome to A Day in the Life, where we are going to introduce you to the companies and individuals that bring the magic of themed experience to life. And I'm your guest host, Andy Garfield. Happy to be
And and I am Kathy Dixon. And today we're talking to three wonderful guests from Creative Studio Berlin. We have Chris Lang, Kirk Axtell, and David Weiss. Welcome to Day in a Life.
Guys.
We're excited
Hello.
to have you guys.
Good morning and good afternoon. Hello.
So, welcome everyone. Shall we just dive right on in? And let's start with you guys' career journeys, of which brought you into Creative Studio Berlin. Shall we start with Chris?
Of course. So I'm calling from Berlin. So it's Friday late afternoon. It's almost the day's over. The week is over. And so my career journey actually is quite different than like Kirk's and David. So obviously now I'm owning a design studio in Berlin. I'm actually grown up and I'm from East Berlin in East Germany. So I was born when there was still a wall in the East and West. And so, yeah, actually I was 11. That was a picture with my dad when the wall came down. So, but I kind of knew already, even behind the Iron Curtain, that I was always super interested in theater and movies. We did had the fantastic Studio Babelsberg, which is just outside of Berlin, which, like I kind of loved going there as a boy, and even like a school internship I used to do there, which kind of, was like, just reassuring that this is, like the movies, the theater, and kind of that arts is really what I want to do later when I'm grown up. Back in the days, there was no such thing like, you can study theme park design, or you can like, like kind of have an education which really like leads you to there. I had as many of us working in the industry, like one of the not life-changing, but like pretty significant event for me was when my parents, myself, my sister took a trip to California when I was like 14 and went the first time to Universal Studios in Hollywood, and then obviously to Disneyland in Anaheim. And I kind of knew, okay, this is really now basically, that was my first experience with kind of themed entertainment, with location-based immersive environments when I was in Disneyland. And so from that moment, I was just like trying to figure out what would be the best career path to have a, to basically, do what I love to do. But as I said, like, so my other passion always have been the movies. So growing up in Berlin, then finishing school, I actually did a little detour and started in movie production for a couple of years, which was like, teaching me very nicely how to be on time, on schedule, and manage budgets. But then I kind of understood very quickly, like, becoming like, like just continuing as a producer was not really what I wanted to do. And then a couple of years later, kind of I shifted to focusing back to, okay, how we're going to get the foot in the door in the themed entertainment industry. There's no real industry here in Germany, like even 30 years ago, there's like some companies, but there's a lot of, parks and amusement parks and theme parks. There's Europa Park, Phantasialand, and usually they had all their own design departments. But I was lucky that, like that was a time when Merlin Entertainments from UK really heavily expanded into the German market. So one of my first projects, for example, was the Sea Life Center here in Berlin. Then later I designed the dungeon and other projects. There was a full circle moment when I was actually taking the Legoland concept, which is the outside theme park, and turn this into the prototype attraction, which they roll out now, which is the Legoland Discovery Center. So that was really cool for me. So, but then I also like, I knew in order to, just, see a lot of things, I always love to travel, like going abroad. And so one of my bigger first international experience going towards Asia was in Mumbai, India, where we designed a theme park there, like a Bollywood inspired with lots of their IPs and movie contents from those Bollywood movies. And then, I was really young. I was completely maybe naive, underestimating that experience. But I can still remember arriving in Mumbai and, in my end 20s and completely was overwhelmed with the city. But I just love the job. So you go through some hard times then maybe, but then also I just love the co-workers which I met there, which I still like, working to this moment, because that's actually where I met Kirk and David. And since ever then, we just keep working together. You see here a great company dinner in the evening. So, but going to Mumbai was really like, just like a great experience. Then after that, I kept working back for Merlin, was involved in the Legoland, but like going back and forth with different positions and different projects all over the world. Used to live in Los Angeles, used to live in Singapore, working on the 20th Century Fox Park back then, which is now Genting Highlands, which was certainly another highlight of my career. And when you get older, you kind of, being torn to go back home again. So then after actually Singapore, I decided to move back to Germany and started as the creative executive down at Europa Park, which was a very exciting time down at Europa Park, because they were just like ready to start the design process for their indoor water park and their big expansion, water park Rulantica. So that was really cool. And I was in charge on that. I could hire just like brilliant talent and try to get them down to south of Germany. And after a couple of years being there, responsible for a lot of attractions, I think I did over 30 projects over there at Europa Park. So then I was, wanted to be back in Berlin. And for the last 3 years, I have my design studio here in Berlin. And we do projects all over the world. That's like in a nutshell.
I love it. That's great. I can't wait to hear more about those projects. That's awesome. And what a journey. David, let's hear from you.
Well, Chris took some time there. So I started at Universal and now I'm doing this show. Sorry, just kidding. I started out with a degree in theater because I wanted to write and direct theater back long before all of you were born. And then I got hired by a friend of mine who worked at Universal here in Hollywood back in '86 when the park was still very small. And he came out here because he said, these shows are theater and I need somebody with a theater background to watch them. At that time, it was Conan and the Western Stunt Show and a couple other things. I think it was A-Team at the time. And I just kind of fell in love with theme parks at that moment because my background was theater and storytelling. And when you're doing theater, you're asking an audience to make a decision about something that's down there at the end on the stage. But when you're doing a theme park or an experience or a themed experience, the audience is on the stage in the middle of that story. And so it really took that background that I had in theater and understanding that story was king and be able to do it with a whole new set of tools and a whole new world of theme parks. And so I started out at Universal, but then I started doing IMAX films. I used to work for a company called iWorks. And I really got to understand that no matter what creativity I came up with, no matter what show I came up with, it was part of a bigger whole. There were other things, there were systems, and you had to put an audience through, and there were timings. So I learned sort of the mechanics of what it took to put a show together. And that helped me in my writing because I understood the end product. I wasn't just writing something that, I thought was beautiful. It had to work, and you had to put 500 people through. And so it was a really good experience. And then I started doing museum projects because I had a kid at the time, and a lot of us from theme parks decided that museums weren't doing very well and our kids didn't like it because they looked like they were museums when we were kids, and they wanted more interactive and immersive stuff. And we started taking what we've learned in theater and theme parks and doing it for museums. But I eventually got back to doing theme parks and attractions. I worked on Universal Singapore. I wrote the Mummy ride there and helped finish the Jurassic Park ride. And then I went to Mumbai, which is just like Chris, is where I met Chris and Kirk, and worked on a number of projects there. And then just continued on. My strength has always been in writing the guest experience treatment, which I think is most important. I think you need to start with that. I think that's sort of the Bible that everybody works from, and I write that. I'm especially keen on writing IP. I've worked with everything from Fast and the Furious to Terminator Genesis, and Chris and I will probably talk later about, Mosh and the Bear. So I love working on IPs because it's how you translate a world that's already been created into the theme park world. But what I love in what I do now is writing that guest experience and kind of starting the ball rolling, and then watching the way the creative teams take it and run with it and really make it into a full-fledged experience. And for me, it always goes back to my theater days, which is story is the most important. Guests want to be entertained. They want to be a part of the story. They want to feel like they're in it and immersive. And because of all that, I just love what we do.
That's awesome. Second only to the writing is, of course, the music. So
you're right, but I can't write music, so there you go. You are correct.
Oh, that's awesome. I remember the Conan show fondly. That was a fun show. I remember seeing that when I was a kid. You mentioned that.
Well, yeah, and I got to
Yeah.
tell you that, from the theater standpoint is, they came in and the ratings were not doing well on the Conan show. And they said to me, well, go in and fix it. And so what we did was we went in, we cleaned off all the pyro dust that had been piling up for years. We repainted the jewels. We redid because it's a live show and it needs to look, it's Broadway. And at that time, Universal really didn't think of their live shows that way. They were more of a product. Obviously they do now, and there's some of the best shows in the world, but back then it was like, no, this is theater and we need to upkeep it. And we need to understand that, these guys need to be kicked every once in a while to make it look better. So it just, again, it was the experience of being in theater that really helped translate the themed entertainment.
That's awesome. Sorry, Kirk, let's
Nope.
update from you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Yeah.
Good morning.
I'm Kirk Axtell, executive show producer working for Creative Studios Berlin. Yeah, I come about this industry a slightly different approach than Chris and David. I'm from California, raised in Northern California. My father's a designer in the film industry, so it was basically design oriented was my background. I went to art center. I kind of stumbled into this through my father. So at about 18, I started working at Landmark and way back when in the mid 80s. Started working overseas in Japan, following jobs through for installation mainly, and then it became design, concept, and installation. So we, so I became kind of a foreign overseas expert on these projects for both mainly IP'd attractions at first, theme parks, location-based entertainment, individual attractions in Japan, World Expos in Korea, location-based entertainment that are media-based in mainland China, Hong Kong, and throughout. Then I met Chris after working in Universal Singapore, and David both in Mumbai, and that was unique because that was all original IP, and that was mainly the first time I had worked on creating our own original IPs and following those designs through, and how to interpret the cultural significance of the available IPs and mysteries and myths and legends that we can exploit, and how we could localize international IPs in some degree as well. So it's a combination of how we can bring our knowledge and being sensitive to the local culture and different locations. And that was his challenge in itself, working with local teams throughout the world. And recently I finished up working in Asia and really wanted to pursue working in Europe a bit. So that's where I started working with Chris. Chris offered an opportunity and I jumped on it to go live and work in Europe for a while. which is a different region, obviously, in the world, but it has its own unique characteristics, which I find very challenging and fun to do. So I've been doing this for about 30, 35 years, since mid 80s, working mainly overseas. And currently I'm in Los Angeles, which is probably the first time that I'll be here for some duration in 20 some odd years. So I'm looking forward to reconnecting to the US.
There is such a wealth of experience and knowledge across all three of you wonderful professionals. Can you, Chris, talk a little bit about um, how that works into what Creative Studio Berlin currently does, and a bit more of the services that the team and the company offers, and kind of how the teams end up working for when you onboard a new project?
The company is probably presenting myself very much and my journey and my personality. So as I said, there was no real, or there is still no real themed entertainment industry in Germany, though there's a lot of attractions in Berlin, which, thankfully, most of them I was involved in designing and building. But really, till this moment, when we do bigger projects, I have to basically almost like expat the experts in and put them up here in housing, because there's now real good education. There's theater education, there's film education, but really, like as we nowadays, like in the themed entertainment industry, having people who really are expert in their field, we have to go to a certain extent and like bring those people here on board and bring them to Berlin. Just like going back a little bit. So like for me, I was very fortunate early on in my career. I could actually work on many different projects at the same time, because I've never been the best designer myself. I've never, my education actually goes into stage design and like sculpting and painting. And I've never been the best in that as well, but I thought that I need that to be a good art director. And, that's a picture from the Mascha construction site, where I basically teach them how to paint with UV paint in order to get the effect we wanted. There in particular, it was like some ice scene, and so we just like tried different paint techniques. And so I still do enjoy that, making my hands dirty. But what I want to say is, so I've never been the best in all those things, but I was always great in getting the best people together on one project. So obviously I do very often have the creative idea and the vision, but then from project to project, you really like get the best people together, who's really the best for that particular project. And that can really go from, like with the Mascha, which is a very heavy IP related project, where it's really important to get the characters right and to get all the looks and style right. But then also, for example, at Europa Park, where we were like creating a lot of original stories, right? So really coming up with own IPs and own ideas. And that, I kind of, took that now also with my company. So what we do is obviously, besides building IP attractions and like helping those experiences being built, but what we also do is very much like create own IPs for our clients and customers. And, I do like both a lot. But I do think, like maybe the little difference is like compared to American parks, which, very often turn to get an IP involved because that's already like a fantastic marketing hook. Like smaller parks in Europe, there's so many different like family owned parks here. And, it is so easy just to do some research, about that region where that park is in. Is there any legends? Is there any mythology, which is like from that region? And then taking those characters or those stories and turn and implement into their parks and make it even more original. And so that's something I really, really enjoy. And that's what we do with my company.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I was gonna add to that. I know somebody asked if I wanted to somebody wanted to continue with the company overview, and I think part of what Chris and all of us do with Creative Studio Berlin is that our industry has gone through a change over the last maybe decade or so. That, you know, there used to be these big huge design companies, and they had a lot of people sitting in one building. They were all really talented, but there was also a lot of overhead, and the industry kind of changed, and the economy, you know, hit, and the pandemic. I mean, all those things that impacted us. And I think that the approach that Creative Studio Berlin takes, which I like, is you find the right people for the right job. You can staff up as needed, but all those people are sitting there ready to go at a moment's notice, and you can put the right people in with the right project. It keeps the overhead down as well, which is nice because you can put the money back into the show. And I am not here to knock any of the large design companies, but I think this is just a really easy, fun way for us to move quickly, be really creative, take on a number of projects, and be able to serve as clients in just a different way, because we're able to, you know, move swift and quick and be able to put the right people together no matter where they are in the world.
Yeah, and I would add to that is also because of COVID is the ability to work remotely and how that technology has really helped cut costs so that we don't have to move people around and we can still get great creativity and good work product working remotely, collaborating from all over the world.
Yeah,
we
even think about
opened.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Now we opened quite some attractions during COVID, right? Like one was a big development in Kazakhstan, including a flying theater and an FEC indoor, you know, mini theme park, you know, with like heavily themed rides and a live show with horses, with over 40 horses on the stage. So we did this, you know, like kind of try to help them remotely, you know, like to open this and keep the quality up. And the same with the Masha and the Bearland, what we did in Turkey for Land of Legends. We truly, you know, like had kind of a slowdown for a couple of months. But then as soon as we could travel again, we would certainly go back to the site and, you know, like as you could saw before, like taking the brush in your hand and like help them to like do final touches and final finishes, you know, on the end product. Yeah. And that's, you know, I you know, what I love most of my job is really like having ideas and having those visions from early on it and see them all the way through. Yeah. And, you know, during my career, as I said before, started with Merlin Entertainments, which they truly, you know, like roll out so many attractions. And so that really teach me to be creative on an effective budget, but also stay in time. And so, but that gave me the opportunity to do like countless dozens of attraction open for them over a couple of years, which, you know, some other people, you know, like they can be happy if they open one attraction in 10 years. And so, and you do a lot of mistakes, right? So like as more you do, but then you learn from that. And that's, you know, that's all stuff and lessons learned, which now we can offer to our clients. And in general, the project, though we do project in Asia and also in the United States, but a lot of our business is in Europe or like even in the East Bloc in Europe. And so things are also going a little bit different. There's a lot where you have to almost like teach the process of attraction design. So because those people are not very familiar, you know, like there's countries like Kazakhstan, they have never, you know, we were involved almost in their very first location-based entertainment project. And that basically took us to teach and educate your client what are the kind of steps we have to do. We go from blue sky, concept design and concept refinement, and all those steps we have to go through. And it's a little bit more like you taking your clients almost on your hands and help them through the process all the way to opening. And I think that would be really good in that basically.
I was just going to add one thing to what Chris was saying, that, you know, about working on a budget is one of the things I've learned now over the years of having the luck of working for a Universal, but also little local clients all around the world, is I've learned one thing, which is your audience doesn't know what you didn't spend. They know what you spent. And when you work with creative people and can find unique ways to do it, you know, clients always say, we don't have Disney money. You don't need Disney money. You need a strong story. You need a strong experience. You need a good design team. And so being able to work with people that can work on those different levels, you know, like Chris and I always say, when you start a project, don't give me any $3 million ideas. We have $2 million and you can do it. So it is really being able to work with talented people who can make those budgets work.
So along those lines, like when you guys are working and collaborating together in this sort of decentralized way now, how do you manage collaborating across such disparate time zones?
Yeah, I'm going to just start with this one because for a while now the team has all been in Berlin and I'm in LA, which is really great at the start of a project because I'm basically the one that writes it down and goes, here's what I think you guys should be designing. And then I'm about a half a day behind the rest of the process.
And then you just go to bed and you wake up and they're like, oh, it's great.
So there's a slight challenge to it, but it's easy to do. I basically work at night, so it's ready for their morning time. But again, I think that also comes back to when you work with really talented people who you trust, you know they're going to take it. And when I wake up in the morning, whatever they've done, I don't have to fix it. You know, if anything, it's a better idea. So, but it is challenging, but it's not hard.
It's also striking a balance between listening, which is always hard when you're so creative, and knowledge-based direction. So as Chris was saying, you know, taking them by the hand and leading them, but you also have to be respectful and listen to both your clients and the abilities of your talented people you work with. Running lean as we do at Chris's studio, and a highly passionate person Chris is, which makes working with him so great, is also we have running lean. We have a diverse team of people that are multi-talented, have to be able to do multiple things. So we specialize, but are multi-talented as well. And it's tapping
most of you guys, not me.
Yeah, you are.
No, but like, and that's as I said. So there's not that entertainment industry here in Berlin. So, you know, I always had to tap into people all over the world. You know, obviously was, you know, develop the process with David, who is the writer in Los Angeles. So usually we start a project with, you know, like talking and developing ideas. It's usually my evening time. You know, like sometimes I'm already on my couch and we just, you know, like screen share and Googling images and, you know, like seeing the story here and seeing this. And then, you know, like I go to bed, then David starts writing basically. And when I get up in the morning, I can review those things and then discuss it right with my team. And then, you know, so very often also we start a process with some ideas and sketches, right? So I'm going to sit here with my designers and sketch some things up and then basically discuss it with David. He adds something to it. And then again, so kind of, I mean, COVID, you know, made things more complicated, like for us when it came to installation of a show and like kind of a creative review and a creative like supervision, which is now then we needed to do digital. But from the creative process, you know, we always have done it that way, you know, like for me in person, like, you know, I never had like, you know, 20 people sitting here in my studio. There's only going to be like 10, 12 people sitting in my studio. But then I, you know, like always use David, who's in Los Angeles. So that hasn't really changed because of COVID, that we like talk more now. It just, you know, like, you know, was more complicated when it comes to creative supervision and on-site art direction. Obviously, that made it very tricky. But even there, you find ways, right, to adjust, of course. But from tapping into, you know, talents all over the world, that's something I have always done with my studio.
And look, there's nothing better than sitting in a room like with these guys and banging ideas and coming up with an idea. But you know what? Our talents didn't change, the technology changed. And so we just found a way to do it digitally. It's still the same people. It's the same thought process. We do the same thing. We just all happen to be on cameras. And sometimes, you know, we walk, unfortunately, into the bathroom with our headphones on during the session, and that does not go over very well. But that's just a mistake. But no, it just, you know, the technology just allows us to do it without being in a room together.
And the trick is allowing an adequate time to develop and nurture these ideas, right? It's not a faucet to turn off and on. you know.
And as much as advantages there are, like, doing this digital, but seriously now, since like the beginning of the year, we started traveling again, and there's nothing better with like Kirk and myself and our architect goes to country, or like goes to Egypt in this case,
yeah.
where we could really sit with the client and do a presentation in front of the Prime Minister of Egypt, and like being there and like being passionate and try to convince them and develop the best idea or sell your ideas, right? So which is always very hard, like one thing is really hard. You do not now anymore, but I used to do quite a few projects in Russia actually, right? And they're like so hard to read, like they have those poker faces and you like, oh, okay, didn't they like the idea? Should we go another direction? So again, it especially when you kick off ideas and pitch things, there's nothing better than obviously being in the same room with those people.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's not water on the table either there.
No, of course not.
No, it's a good water. It's good water. It's good water.
It's good German water. Burnt tap water.
Yeah.
So you have worked on a wealth of projects that even brought this team together. Would you be able to share some of the projects that the team has worked on? In terms of, I know that there's Wrath of God, there's Legoland, Discovery, and Masha the Bear.
Let's maybe start with the early ones. If you want to talk about the Legoland Discovery Center, which I was involved in the prototype that actually was being built here in Berlin. And the idea was really to take, Merlin Entertainment used to have the Dungeons and the Sea Life brand, which is like considered like smaller investment midway attractions, which are, the return of investment is, quite aggressive for them. So the idea was, okay, how can we bring the Lego brand to more people, right? Like go to smaller cities, which cannot like necessarily support like a whole Legoland outdoor theme park, like the one in Oceanside, California, or, like down in south of Germany. So we try to really like take, and that's the giraffe at the entrance. And funny enough, full circle story here, we actually took over a project Kirk used to work on, because that's in the Sony Center, in the city center of Berlin, which in the Sony Center, there used to be a Sony music box, which was another attraction experience, which was connected to music, which were unfortunately not very successful. So we took over that space, our basement space, and really built the first Legoland Discovery Center, and then obviously rolled it out more. There's one in Chicago, which I was involved with. There's one in Manchester. There's one in Duisburg. And so, and with every rollout, obviously, you could try to improve the project and the product a little bit better. But then also there were things which was clear, like core components, which were, necessary, like the mini land. The difference for the mini land, for example, is that, the ones in the Legoland theme parks, they have a much different scale. They don't use the minifigures for their mini land. So I really like the mini lands, particularly in the Legoland Discovery Center, because they're much smaller. And they actually use the real minifigures, which come with the Lego product and the Lego sets. So that was really fun, really cool. If we maybe want to go to the project in Mumbai, where Kirk and David and myself actually met for the very first time, there should be some references, I think, in the portfolio PDF you can show. Like that's one thing which, that attraction, if you want to keep that picture up there, being called Wrath of the Gods. That was an awesome special effect show, which, I personally learned a lot, because the idea was to design a special effect show indoor, where different gods would fight each other, and the guests would be basically in the middle of this temple, and then kind of, the temple's crashing, water effects, fire effects. And designing those characters, for me, I just learned so much, because we worked with the team in Mumbai, which anyway was a fantastic experience, because there's also now themed entertainment industry in Mumbai. So we had a local team, which we as Westerners were like leading, and they were super talented, but they have never been to a theme park or designed a theme park, which basically you had to start at the very, at the very beginning to teach them what a queue line is, what the ride station for coaster would look like. But even what a bench or like a drinking fountain would be. And so, but that made them just like also super loyal and so hardworking. So I truly enjoyed working with that team over there. And so this attraction, I then learned a lot because it was about to design those three gods, which would fight with each other. But obviously, we shouldn't offend any religion. And there's so many religions in India. There's so many different languages in India. And so the team actually taught us how to, design characters or those gods as characters without offending like a real religion, right? So there was like rules like, okay, it couldn't have 6 arms, it couldn't have this, it couldn't have that. And that's just like a great example of where you basically learn from every project. And that's why I still love to travel and go abroad, because it makes your life so much richer.
Right. And I would say on that project, from a writing standpoint, it's no different than every other project I work on, which is you have to do research, you have to understand what the story's about, but you still have to turn it into something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have to turn it into something that a guest walks through a certain beats, no matter what the subject matter is, no matter what the culture is, no matter what that is that we still have a very simple process that we want people to come into some sort of experience and come out changed somehow. And so my job at the beginning anyway, and then Chris and his team go nuts with it, is to try to establish that storyline. And that's true whether it's India. When I worked on the stuff in Kazakhstan that Chris and I did last year, they were like shocked that I understood their story. And I'm like, it's not hard. You read it. You know what I mean? It's not in a different language. It was a really interesting story. And then we find the way to translate that into a guest experience and a design. And so that's the cool thing about working on overseas projects for me is being able to understand that culture and bring their culture to life.
Though just adding to that, sometimes it can be a little bit more tricky working in different countries with different languages. Nowadays there's so much translation in the internet, but then also for Kazakhstan, there was like a lot of like literature which were only like, in Russia basically, or like in Cyrillic. And so we had then needed to employ like experts who could translate that for us, right? Absolutely. And then very often, like in the Kazakhstan project, because it was very close to a World Heritage site, so there were anyway experts who could consult us on certain things. But then on the project in Siberia, for example, there, David just did his research and like watched actually movies. I think there was more documentary about that place where we built that resort compared to what you could find and read in the internet.
Right. And I tell clients all the time, I tell Chris this all the time if he brings a project to me, is we always tell the client or the IP stakeholder, I'm not telling my story, I'm telling your story. And so we have to find out how to do that. Sometimes I can figure it out. Sometimes Chris can figure it out. Sometimes but other times, we do need the client's help because it's their story. We want to bring that story to life and make sure we're true to what they want.
Yeah.
And I would say also that each location and each client has a different set of requirements, and it changes from site to site and location to location. So there's always different variables that go into this. How do you localize it respectfully? How do you employ the best people locally as well as internationally? What are the technologies that are workable in a location? Maybe we want to build something outrageous in Mumbai, but there's no ability technically to maintain that. So we have to go a different direction. So a lot of the initial work conceptually is marrying ideas to the functionality of our goals. And those adapt as you move forward sometimes.
Yeah, I can deeply relate to that. As a white guy working here in Burbank, California, I've had to write all kinds of different styles of, ethnic styles of music, like Chinese, you know, um, Filipino, all kinds of,
Hmm.
Russian, and it's just like, you have to be really culturally sensitive, and like it's constantly a learning process for me. Like, I get notes back from our Chinese clients and saying like, oh, well, the use of the cymbals and gongs here isn't appropriate because those are considered celebratory, and this
Right.
isn't a celebration, it's a fight. So I'm like, noted.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Again, it's their story. So
Right.
thank you for the information. You
And
Exactly.
know,
sometimes it could be the most subtle thing that we just assume is okay, and
Right.
it's not.
right.
Yeah. For me, it's
Uh,
just an aesthetic thing, but to them, it has actual meaning.
it does. Well, it's their culture.
Right.
I was going to keep going with sort of the how we as a team work together on a project and talk about our Masha and the Bear project, which started around November of 2019, back when the world was a different place. And Chris came to me, the client that he had at the Land of Legends in Antalya, Turkey, had got the rights to Masha and the Bear, the cartoon series in Russia, and wanted to do some sort of attraction for it. And I think originally either Chris or the client wanted it to be a boat ride. So I knew that, but I basically had to download 30 different cartoons and watch the cartoons and find out the best storyline to come up with, working with Chris, the best storyline to come up with of what would work for this boat ride. And that eventually expanded into an entire land where we did a carnival, we did rides there. You can see it there. You see the boat ride, but there was also a circus show, which I ended up writing. So all of these things added into it. But again, it was all based on that IP, and it began, I always go back to this key point, which is it began with story. And I thought of something, Chris helped develop it and finalize it. The client liked it. The IP client said, wow, you guys understand our property. And we built it. And so I won't ever say it's an easy process because we do a lot of work, but we know how to do these things. And especially on an IP, it's right there in front of you. Just pick the things you want and what you think makes the guest experience. And so that, and then Chris took it and built it and had it installed. And we did it all in the middle of COVID in about 10 and a half months.
Yeah, that was a little crazy. Yeah, but there have been other smaller installation with Masha and the Bear, and it's a super popular IP here in Europe. And so, that client, Land of Legends, they knew, a lot of their guests are Russian, and so it's even more popular in Russia, but also like all over Europe, it's super popular. So they knew they want to do something with that. And so they also knew, or actually I advised them to do a boat ride, which, basically gives you a longer experience, like the park as it is right now, or as it has been before, where some coasters, some, flat rides, but overall, all those rides experience attractions, they were like a super short duration. So we wanted to build something which really like takes guests on a journey, and it's a boat ride. It takes you 8 minutes to, do one loop. And so also with the weather condition at the Mediterranean Sea in south of Turkey, it was clear, okay, we want to also create some indoor scenes, which are like, air conditioned. We also knew there should be a roof on the boat because like just the sun in the summertime is super harsh and too brutal for, especially kids and families. And so then all those things basically come together, right? Sometimes it's like, it's a big puzzle and you try to like, put those pieces together. And then so we all landed on the boat ride, which funny enough, like brings you to the seasons. So it's been called Masha and the Bear. The land is like land of laughter because like in the IP, she's laughing all the time. But then the, what's it called? The Joyful Journey, which is truly go through the season. So there's a winter scene, there's a spring scene, and there's birthday in the summertime, and so on and so on. Yes.
Am I correct in understanding you pitched at first just a single boat ride, and then they liked it so much that they asked you to pitch a whole land?
we knew that we wanted to do the land, but like funny enough, we actually, the circumstances are that they also had the rights to do a live show. And so they were like, okay, where can we put the live show in the land? And like if you're familiar with the IP, there's basically only two buildings. There's the Masha House, and then there's the House of the Bear. There's no other facility where we could put a live show in, which needed to have a canopy. So, but then the bear escaped, or left the circus, and the idea was really, okay, maybe the circus comes back to town, and that obviously in the circus tent we could put a live show, which is a nice environment for the guests to watch that show in the summertime. So it was clear that we need some canopy structure, and I kind of refused to put the canopy structure in my Russian forest, which was the original Masha land. So we just added a little mini land next to the original planet land, and that came later. And then we also basically took some of the existing rides in the theme park, which was already existing, and kind of took some out, which were just perfect. So they had a beautiful merry-go-round ride, which was next to another carousel. And I was like, you know what? Why would you put two carousels so close next to each other? Why don't we take that ride and put it in the circus area? And why don't we take the little kiddie coaster, also put that in the circus area? So it was in the process of we already building the original Masha land. We just came with the idea and then adding the circus land as well.
Right. And I would say this is to anybody out there who wants to sort of be on the writing end of things, is I did write a circus show and I did write a horse show in Kazakhstan. There's all kinds of different things that you get to write and you research them, but they're all the same thing. Create a story, create a through line, create the characters. So no matter what the subject matter is, and what the tools you have to play with, like I had horses to play with in this show, but whatever, it's when you write, you're still writing it from the point of view of the guest and what you want them to see, A to B to C to D. And then again, the designers then take it and go nuts with it. But it's that path, and it's always something different, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's like any creative skill. It's as long as you have a really good, handle on the craft, you can do anything with it.
Right. If somebody told me once, if you want to be a writer, write.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense to me.
Well,
and you can do it.
Let's talk about Rolantica. I'd love to learn more about that. I love indoor water parks. I love water parks in general, but indoor water parks are especially cool to me, and especially in a year-round water, the year-round capabilities of an indoor water park, especially in Europe. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started actually working on the water park for Europa Park with my own company first as a consultant. So they were playing around with the idea of building a water park, adding a second gate to Europa Park for a long, long time. I think actually it's 17 years in the making, because there was just some environmental things going on with the land they wanted to buy for the place, for the water park and the expansion. And so anyway, when I came in the game, the name Rolantica was already decided, but nobody knew what it would be, right? So we kind of really started, we had the name and they had it trademarked and protected and all of that, but nobody knew what that is, right? So it could have been a ship, traveling the oceans. It could have been whatever. I knew that I didn't want to do anything underwater, because, there's so many water parks with, Atlantis and underwater things. And so I kind of wanted to stay away from that. I wanted to do something, very unique. And so we decided that Rolantica would have been an island, but a hidden island in the Northern Sea, which, giving us that location, we kind of knew that would also help us finding design answers, how the buildings would look like, and how this is a picture here of our, the working title was Forest Lagoon, because what we really tried is to do very distinctive themed lands and areas They all like taking place of that island called Rolantica, but they're all very different. So, which is also like Europa Park, like though you have different countries represented in Europa Park, but each feels very different. And, some are a little older, some are newer countries. And so, and it's this fantastic thing when you like walk to the Greek country in Europa Park, you're turning around and suddenly you're being like in France, and so on and so on. And so like that kind of feeling I wanted to also translate into the water park. So we have 7 different lands in the water park. Like one you just saw is the Forest Lagoon. There's something called, that's Rolantica Town. That's from the outside. It's a big indoor water park. And so again, we went to length of really coming up with stories and theming the inside of the water park, which is, quite difficult. It's very easy to build like a rockwork mountain or rockwork facades outside in an environment, but doing this in the inside water park with the chlorine and the humidity, it's really different to like really engineer that. And just like materials are very different to use. So Rolantica was like a great project. When I first started as a consultant working on this, coming up with the idea and the storylines, then Europa Park asked me, actually my MAC asked me to come on board full time, because it was a very exciting time down there. They were just investing a lot, and there was like a big plan to really grow the resort with new hotels and new attractions in the park. So, to me, for some years, it was like the best toy box in the world, because, you could hire a lot of talent and you could just really be the creative leader, coming up with those ideas and then, putting it in place and actually building a lot of them with your team. So that was really fantastic. And now Rolantica obviously being expanded, there's a big outdoor area. What you just saw on the picture, there's a playground, outdoor playground, which the idea is it's a floating island, which looks from the distance in the fog. Basically, it has the outline of a big sea snake fighting with a big octopus. And so the idea is basically that this kind of floating island is protecting the island of Rolantica. So when ships come by, they're being scared, and so they turn around and they don't go in this way, because it's that hidden island in the fog. But then you can blow the horn, and then basically the fog goes away and you see that island. And with Rolantica, we also knew, and that's a good gateway into the next attraction, which is Snorri Touren, because we knew we want to establish characters, right? We want to sell plush and toys and all of that. And so the character who is living on Rolantica Island, one of the characters, is Snorri, and who is this super cute octopus, which we designed. The people at Mac Media and their character designers came up with that cute design. And so, and that gave us basically a way to connect the stories of Rolantica and bringing it back to Europa Park, because, there was this horrible fire in 2018. And so there's a lot of, in the center of the park, which was the Dutch area and the Scandinavian area, like burned away, which was horrible. But that also gave us basically the opportunity to build some new attractions there. And one of the new attractions would be a dark ride, which was in the basement of the Scandinavian area. And so, which has been called Snorri Touren, because the idea was that, like that little octopus gives tours through Rolantica. So the guests would board and they would queue in the basement of, being in Scandinavia, in a building there. And then Snorri would blow his horn, and then magically we would be transferred into Rolantica. And so then we also go around on a dark ride on a vehicle here. And you see, this is like the trolls, for example, they sing for you. And so we try to recreate the areas which we have in the water park, also now here in the theme park, which, was a very nice idea. And it's a FEAR award-winning attraction. So everybody loves it, and it turned out just beautiful.
I love that terrified kid in the back row of that picture. He's just like, the trees.
I'm scared.
We did our job.
Awesome. I love that you mixed those elements with the dark ride and the water park and all that. It's just awesome. I can't wait to go and see that.
That's really awesome with, smaller parks. Or I mean, like, Europa Park is the second largest park in Europe after Disneyland Paris. But with those parks, which are like, that's a family owned business, and you have ideas, and like there's no big line of approvals, right? So you have an idea, you talk to the owners, and then we're just going to do things. So like everything needs to be decided very quickly, and like you get like achieved so much more because there's no big approval process, right? So you have an idea. Sometimes I was walking around the park with the owner and bit my tongue because very often I would say something, oh, see this facade, shouldn't we do this and this? And they would say yes. And then they would come a week later and say, why is it not done yet? And you would say, oh, because we have the list of other 60 projects we're doing right now. So it's down on the list. And so sometimes you actually really had to bite your tongue to come up with ideas. But that's also, it's fantastic, right? Like for me as a creative director, it as I said, it was like truly like a toy box. Yep. And then like maybe just like talking about Batavia, the Pirates of Batavia, which used to be also an all classic ride at Europa Park, which unfortunately also like being completely destroyed in the fire in 2018. And that also gave us the opportunity to revisit the story. Obviously the fans kind of demanded to bring back Batavia, but we also like obviously studied different ideas and different ride systems. But then it was very clear we want to bring back that boat ride. But that also basically gave us the opportunity to make it better and more immersive, right? So the original one was like built 30 years before. And now with the new creativity and with also obviously like, being financially more stable, Europa could really invest in like bringing like this new version of Pirates of Batavia with, better animatronics, better scenery to life without, paying still tribute to the old original one, because we did use a lot of the original designs for the boat ride and use that as inspiration for our new storyline and the new scenery. But that was certainly also, a highlight project.
Or I'd say, let's do it for real, right?
Yeah. No, it's, like there is like in Europe, quite honestly, there's many Pirate of the Caribbean rip-offs. There's one in Gardaland, there have been one in Europa Park, and there's many more. Because, like in the 80s, nobody would like travel, on the 70s, nobody would travel to Orlando or to Disneyland to see the real one.
Right.
And so it was completely okay to just, be inspired or sometimes just like copy the real Pirates of Caribbean ride. And so there's many parks who have their own version. And so I was just like, happy to take Europa Park's version. Also, Pirates of Batavia, like Batavia, which is Jakarta, Southeast Indonesia, where I lived in Singapore for some time. So, and obviously traveled to all those temples and, all those beautiful beaches and jungles. And so basically I feel like so happy to design and be there in the real location, Angkor Wat and so on and so on. All those temples you always use as your reference when you like create something like that, and put that with that knowledge into the game and like design a beautiful new ride for them.
That's awesome. I mean,
and I would add that, life, I was just going to say life is, you're constantly going through life doing research. It's your life, and staying current and employing different ideas as they come up. What I've learned is good ideas can come from anybody, going to 2 o'clock in the morning to a programming, the taxi driver is asking you what you do for a living, and then he comes up with an idea, and you kind of sit back and go, you know what, that's not a bad idea. They come up from anybody sometimes.
Yeah.
And you were asking like advice, how did I get in the industry? I was lucky because I had my father, but we are only able to succeed if we reach out to people who've done this before and mentor. And so, like, I had many people in my life that reached down and helped me come up, gave me the confidence to move forward. So I would say, it's your personal ability, it's your ability to recognize your strengths as well as key as your weaknesses, and know that there's people out there that can help you, and don't be afraid to ask. Be the key.
Right. Well, and the advice I have for people now is something I wish I had told myself when I was younger, which is I didn't know everything back then.
Yep.
I sure thought I did, but I didn't. And the beauty of our industry and working with people like Chris and Kirk is I learn something new every day because I listen. And that doesn't mean my talents are any less. I come up with really, really good ideas, but they're not done and they're not complete. And you need the help of everybody to put in. And if you can set those people on that right path and listen for the right ideas and make sure that it stays true to that story you're telling. And I wish I had started that way when I began, because it's really important to be able to keep learning. I mean, I'll be 65 this year and I'm still learning stuff when I do projects with these guys. And that's great because it just makes my work better. And the other advice I would have for people is work is work is work. Do anything and everything you can if you want to be in this business. And I would highly suggest if you want to write and design theme parks that you go work in one for a summer. Because anybody can draw a pretty picture of a theme park, but can you build one that works? Can you do what the guests need to do? I think it's really important to go work in a theme park for a while. If you wanted, I worked at Universal and got run over by guests, but it taught me a lot about how these things work. And I would say the last piece of advice that I give people is, especially when you're writing, is see it from the point of view of your guest. And that's not always the point of view of your client. It's not always your point of view. It's the point of view of your guest, and that's who you're writing it for. Sometimes you're not writing it for the client. They think you are, but that's not their guest. And so that's really important to stay true to what that guest is going to do in that experience.
Yeah. Awesome advices. What should I add now? I mean, don't be afraid to, like an advice for younger people. And I'm being quite involved in the Themed Entertainment Association, in the international board. But like, I just love the TA as a community. To me, it always has been family, and so I'm mentoring like those some students, and I just always say, don't be afraid to reach out. Like we all, have been younger and try to get into the industry. And, just as like Kirk said, there was a lot of people who were like influencing his career and like supported him. Like my very first believer in me was my boss in the movie production company. And she was just like, giving me, was like, beginning of my 20s, all this responsibility, which, looking back 30 years later, it might have been too much. But nevertheless, you just, like you jump in the cold water and you just like get through there and just reach out. And there are so many inspiring people, from John Wood at Sally's, Drew Hunter at Sally's, Cliff Warner with Micro 2. And so just fantastic people who, now I'm just like being fortunate that, like those young people reach out to me and I try to help them and advise them. And again, here in Germany, Berlin in particular, it is much different when in the United States. So, trying to share my way, making it work into the career, helps people here more maybe in Germany or like in Berlin, but then all over the world, right? So like now with the internet, with the Zoom, it is so easy to connect with everybody. And you will be surprised, even the biggest CEO will take time to help people, because in the end, we are also very proud what we achieved. And obviously you want to share that, right? So, and you want to support younger people, because I know eventually they will hire me, right? Maybe in 10 years, 20 years, or even 5 years, those young people, they make their career, and then maybe they're gonna hire me. So, and that's just like, like the circle how our industry works, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of getting into creative industries is luck, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there and put yourself into positions to receive that luck and talk to the right people, be the right person at the right place at the right time, and be willing to, move out of your comfort zone if you need to learn new things at, every turn.
Right. And I would just add one thing. I know we want to wrap it up probably pretty soon, but I've been helping teach a class in immersive experiences at University of Texas. A lot of universities, a lot of places are now opening up those type of programs because everybody wants to do it. And a lot of these younger kids come out of, the PlayStation 4 world and the app world. And it's interesting to start to get their take on what it is we do and how you create experience. So there's opportunities, out there, even in universities now. It's a little different than learning from us because we've been through the ringer, but there's places to do that now.
Yeah, I wish there would be places what I was like starting in. So it was like much more complicated to find my way in. But then again, it was even more important to, seriously like work and then save money and go to IAPA or go
Yep.
to a TA event, back
Right.
then, and just like, take all your guts and approach those older people and talk to them. I think like nowadays, I'm always saying it's so much easier because you can like write people on LinkedIn or you have a Zoom call, which is a little easier than like actually walking up to somebody, because I know how hard it is, right? Like a lot in those events, parties, mixtures, we are also very happy to see each other again and talk to each other again, right? Because we haven't seen each other for such a long time now, especially during COVID. So, like for a young person to come in and interrupt, obviously you don't do this, like my parents taught me different, never like, interrupt an older person talking. But so you have to, you just have to have those guts and do it, because, like, again, I just received such positive feedback. And again, like people took me on my hands and tried to point me in another direction. Even if they couldn't help me directly, they would try to introduce me to somebody else. And that's really how I kind of, made it in the industry. Like you never on your own. You have to, you just have to like, be brave and do that first step.
And do listen, but find your voice.
Kurt, do you
Also,
have
like
any?
maybe, I mean, like because it is Pride Month, and like me being gay, that young boy from Berlin, Germany. It also, again, like there was nobody here in Berlin or in Germany which I could look up to, or did I know from, who could be a role model. That's me with my cousin building Christmas markets out of my Legos. Which, again, like, with 6 years old. So, I mean, like looking back now, it all makes sense. But, when you're small and younger or a teenager, nothing makes sense, of course. No, but also like, having people which are really being very, very open, and who taught me it is absolutely okay the way you are, and there's nothing wrong with you. And and who were supportive. I just want to like mention, Cliff Warner again, who was like a beautiful personality and like a good friend for so many years now. And yeah, that just like, one of the people, Drew, John, like it's so many people who helped me to now have my own company. Who would have thought that 25 years ago? Like certainly not me. And that's just fantastic. So you're not alone, and like just reach out to people, because you will be surprised how open and appreciative those people will be to you.
Yeah, when I was first starting out doing music for theme entertainment back in early 1999, I was befriended by Joe Alfuso, who's a well-known Disney arranger, theme park arranger, and he had some great advice for me. It's like, never worry about like reaching out to somebody, because like you're like there's enough work to go around for everybody, and you're not, generally you're not like stealing work from like seasoned professionals, and you're not going to get the Christmas parade job. Joe's going to keep getting that job. So eventually you'll get projects like that, but like never be afraid to reach out to people like that. And like, you talk about how things are different too. Like in 1993 or 94, I was at UFC studying with Buddy Baker, who was the head of music for Disney for a long time. And I just straight up asked Buddy one day, I'm like, how do you get a job at Imagineering? And he put out his black book and he flipped through it and he's like, well, you call Glenn Barker and tell him I told you to call. And I worked at Imagineering the next week. But it doesn't really quite happen like
You
that.
never know.
Yeah.
No, but if you
No,
didn't ask,
but
you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think it's also important, and I think this comes back to what the three of us do in the entire group at Creative Studios. You also want to find people that you like when you work with them, because we're all kind of creative in different ways, but we have to live together, even if it's on Zoom. And when you find people that you like and that are creative, it makes it really easy.
Yeah, definitely true.
Yeah. You form a family, a team that you trust.
For sure.
Well,
I mean,
except for Kirk,
Yeah,
but that's different. That's, Kirk is he's
No, but like the job is like stressful enough. We work long hours. We travel countries, and it sounds very exotic very often from the outside, but like you really have to love what you're doing, otherwise you could not put the hours. And so as I get older, I get better, like reducing my hours, but it's still like more than average, I would say. But so it's even more important that you do love and like the people you work with, right? And though you try to pull them into those projects, like using David, like having Kirk now with me, but then like from the show programmer till the lighting designer, so you do want to work with because you're away from home, so for such a long time you want to then surround yourself with good people and good energy, and that's really important to us, really, to work with, and it can be tough sometimes, because when you're friends with somebody and mixing business, right, that's also sometimes a tricky decision, but again, overall, like we sacrifice so much time and passion to what we love to do, and so you wanna like have a family around you and want to have people who support you and can support you emotionally also. So don't, like, we don't work with assholes, we try not to.
Yeah, I always
try not to.
I always
It's the first time I've heard that, but okay.
Yeah, I always tell young people as advice, be the kind of person people want to have around.
Yep.
Yeah, it's important. It's really important to, like you said, not be an asshole. So I mean, and I've made lifelong friends in the trenches of integration and installation before as well, and it's almost like waging war, and you're sort of like brothers and sisters in arms sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, it's being respectful, listening, being respectful. Yeah.
Right. Well, Kathy, you want to
Kumbaya.
Yeah.
Kumbaya.
Big hug, big group hug.
Thank you so much for this time and sharing your wisdom. We shall end on this happy note of everyone being a family from the projects that you get to work on and be a part of, So thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much, and thank you guys for being such gracious guests in my co-hosting debut.
No worries.
Well,
somebody get that
great.
truck get the truck that's backing up. That's what we need.
So thank you guys. I've enjoyed this very much. I hope it's helpful to everybody.
Yeah, and please, feel free to reach out. We are hiring. We always need like young talent, old talent.
Oh, you're gonna get hundreds.
Can I send you my resume?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then just again, feel free to reach out. We're happy to share and help wherever we can.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.